Hello, I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with the books that I ended up reading in June. And you know what? I think for once in my YouTube career, this will not be a 20-minute long wrap up. So I have my stats for the month. I ended up reading 6 books in total, which was about 2,984 pages, which is approximately 99 pages per day. There were 4 physical books that I read and 2 audiobooks that I listened to. 5 of them were adult books and 1 was a young adult. And the genres I read, actually, it's interesting this month, I guess. I read 1 fantasy book, I read 2 horror books, I read 1 book that could be either historical fiction or fantasy, more historical fiction though I think, and 2 nonfiction books, which, I don't know, is a little bit abnormal, I guess, for me. But it was a really great reading month, I think. As far as star ratings go, the lowest I had was 3.5 stars. So everything else I read, I had 3 4-star books and 2 5-star books. My average for the month was 4.25 stars. So I think that is the highest average I've had this year for sure, but probably in a long time. The years I read, the oldest book was published in 1982. Then I had 2 2006 books, a 2019 book, and then 2 2020 books, which were new releases. And I read one of my 5-star prediction books, which was Fantasticland, and I will tell you how I felt about that in a minute. So I want to get through the audiobooks that I read first, so I don't forget about them, because sometimes I forget, because if I don't have the physical book sitting next to me, I have a goldfish brain. First, I'd like to talk about Hidden Valley Road, which was written by Robert Kolker, and I believe I have another nonfiction book that he wrote. I think it's a true crime book. Sorry, my nose is itchy. So, Hidden Valley Road came out this year, and I was able to rent it as an audiobook from my library. So, Hidden Valley Road was really kind of wild. It's one of those books where it was like, I guess if I didn't tell you this was a real story, if I just said there is this plot, and the plot is that this couple has 12 children, and 6 of them have schizophrenia, you'd be like, whoa, that's so crazy, because it seems, I mean, you'd probably think that it's fiction, because it seems too strange to be true, but it is a true story, and that's what Hidden Valley Road is about. So it goes obviously into the history of this family. Their last name is Galvin, so they're the Galvin family, and you know, they start out basically living the American dream, and they decide to have lots of children. And with things like schizophrenia, usually that doesn't develop until later in life, usually around the late teenage and early adult years. And so, you know, they have 12 children. And by the time they're having the last of their children, their first son starts developing these really strange ideas and behaviors. And, you know, he eventually gets diagnosed with schizophrenia. So it goes into the history of the family, the children growing up, a lot of, you know, this family trying to cope, and, you know, the mother doesn't want to send her sick children away, but they are adult men who are fighting each other and terrifying their younger siblings. And yeah, it's really sad. It's sad to see how, because let's see, when did this take place? I keep having to look back at the... Okay, so let's see. The oldest son was born in 1945. So by the time he's 20, it's in the 60s. And obviously mental health still isn't great, the way that we deal with the mentally ill. But if you can imagine it being even worse in the 60s, and they don't really know what to do with their schizophrenic children, and they don't know what kind of medication to give these people, and it is awful, especially knowing like some of the medications that they ended up giving, some of them probably exasperated the problems and made it so that even putting them on the right medication wouldn't really help the symptoms of their schizophrenia. And oh, it's horrible. It's all told, the book is told through interviews that the author was able to get from the parents and the children. And when he spoke with the two youngest children, who were the family's only two girl children, it's really sad because they wanted to get out of there. They did not feel connected to their siblings, and they were scared of their siblings, and they were upset with their mother because it seemed like she wanted to protect the sick children more than help the children who are being affected by the sick children. And yeah, it was really sad. If you can imagine just like the crazy family dynamics that has to go on when something like that happens. So it was a good read. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Okay, so the next book I'd like to tell you about is a book called Evicted. And this is another nonfiction book. This was written by Matthew Desmond, and this one came out in 2016. This is another one that I was able to rent from my library as an audiobook. I really liked the narrator for this one. So this book was kind of about just like this cycle of eviction and how we collectively as a society have really made it harder for lower income people and people of color, specifically Black people, to have affordable housing. And this book basically goes through that, and it was really interesting because he follows, I think it was 8 different families through a couple years, and also a woman who is the landlords to a couple, or the landlord to a couple of these families. And so you kind of get different perspectives, you know, the perspective of the landlord. Maybe she is a slumlord. And also, you know, the families who are affected. And it mostly follows Black families around, but I believe there is also one white family. So yeah, it was a really good book. I don't really know what to tell you guys more than that, but it just like kind of makes you feel really sad. I mean, truly, when you read this book, it really does give you, you know, the feeling that we have purposely kept people in this cycle of being evicted and kept them in the cycle of having to live in the bad parts of town, even though it's not even cheaper for them to live there most of the time, you know? It's really fucking sad. It's a really sad story. It doesn't make you feel good when you're done with it. But I gave it 5 stars. All right, next on my list is Devolution by Max Brooks. This is a 2020 book. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I will give you a really brief summary of this, but I did do a more in-depth but spoiler-free review of this. I'll leave the link in the little clicky thing if you'd like to watch that. But this is the story of a couple named Kate and Dan, and they are moving to this really small eco-community up by Mount Rainier in Washington. Volcano erupts at one point, and they're cut off from the outside world. And this is a really remote, very small community. There are 6 families living here, and well, it's a Bigfoot story. So I mean, maybe you can imagine what happens when they are cut off from the world. And so it's like a really good survival story. It's told in journal entries, but there are also interviews with like scientists and Bigfoot experts, and also her brother, which kind of gives you some background on her life a little bit. Yeah, I thought it was really good. There's really good survival elements. It's interesting with like the scientific points of view that they give, and it was pretty good. My one complaint is that other people living in this community, their neighbors, felt so much more rich than the 2 main characters did. Even like Katie, and reading her journal entries, which would make you, I mean, like you would assume that you would get to know her very well, But I don't know, she was just very, very bland, especially compared to her neighbors, which was kind of disappointing. So 4 stars, still really good, still would recommend, but not the best book I've ever read. And I really liked World War Z much better. Okay, next I have Fantasticland by Mike Bockoven. This was one of my 5-star predictions for the year, and it only ended up getting 4 stars from me. So this is a book about this really sudden hurricane that happens in Florida, and it goes up way past where hurricanes usually do, like into like the center and really high up into Florida. So where this amusement park is called Fantasticland, they don't usually have hurricanes that far into Florida. So when this hurricane hits, it's like so fast and so unexpected that they evacuate the park, and most of the customers are, you know, safely out of the park, but some of the employees are left behind, and things just really devolve very quickly. You see these employees, they kind of form their own groups, and I don't know, one of the groups is very, very aggressive, which kind of just causes everybody to like try to kill each other and like all this crazy shit. What was fun is that this is told in interviews. The different voices in this book are very apparent, you know, like, you know, it's not just, it doesn't seem like it's just the same person getting interviewed over and over again. Like, you can tell that these are different characters, which was, I liked that a lot. And I will say, I listened to some of the audiobook on this. I think it was on Scribd, and I would listen to this sometimes at night before I would fall asleep. And the audiobook narrators were very good. It was a full cast audiobook, and sometimes I don't really like those because they seem very theatrical, but this one was really good. So yeah, I mean, they get into like what happened there, because when they're rescued, there's like dead bodies and like disfigured people and like all this crazy shit. So it gets into what happened, why it happened, and yeah, it was pretty good. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. It just didn't make sense to me why these people started attacking each other. It just didn't make sense. It was like, it was so soon after the hurricane, and it was like they had supplies. So I guess that's the point of the book, is figuring out why this happened when they really didn't have anything to fight over. But I just felt like that wasn't really explained very well, and I don't know, I expected, you know, from the synopsis, it makes it seem like it's going to be so like shocking and crazy, and it just wasn't. I don't know, it didn't quite live up to my expectations that I gave it without even reading it, I guess. So 4 stars, still good though. Okie dokie. Next I have The Dragon Republic by R.F. Quang. This is a fantasy book. This is a sequel as well, so I can't give you a very good synopsis of what happens here. But in the first book is called The Poppy War, and I read that a couple months ago, and I really liked the first one. So that was about a girl named Rin. Rin lives in a very, very poor area, and basically her options are like, you can get married to some old man, or you can, you know, live on the street. And instead she decides to take a test to get into one of the most prestigious military academies in their, on their island, I guess. And she makes it, but it's a very rough road for her, because a lot of the other children at the academy have been trained from childhood to get into here, and she had just like crammed for the last few months. So she ends up getting into the academy, and then there is a war. This takes place during the same war, and I guess that's all I can really tell you without giving anything away. But I did not like this one as much as I liked the first one. I felt very not connected to the characters, and it felt very long. I mean, it's a big book and it felt long. Okay, lastly, my favorite book of the month. This was a reread for me. This is the Miss of Avalon, and this was published in 1982. I will say ahead of time, the author was not a good person. Although the allegations about her came out after she and her husband were both already dead, so there was no way to refute some of the things that they said. However, her husband did go to prison for having relationships with very young teenage boys, and he died in prison. But there are also allegations by her daughter that she was molested by her parents. But she is dead. None of the money, she can't make money off of this, and her publisher does donate any proceeds from her books to charities that deal with child sexual abuse, so that's really cool. And there is no child sexual abuse in this book. So this is the Miss of Avalon, and this is such a great book. And it's hard to quantify because of what the author did, I guess. But she is dead. She does not make any money off of this. So I feel like I can separate it from the terrible person that the author is accused of being. This is a kind of retelling of the Arthurian saga with King Arthur. However, it's told by the women in his life rather than him or his like knights and all that. So the main characters are really Morgane, who is his sister, and Guinevere, who is his wife. There are a couple other women who, you know, we see through we read through their points of view at some point, but really it's between Morgane and Guinevere. And the big conflict of this story is that there is this place called Avalon, which is more like magical thinking, and they have kind of a religion, but I say that really loosely because it doesn't really seem like a religion to me. It's more like, I don't know, just giving thanks to the earth, who they call the goddess, and they really believe that all the gods are connected to the goddess, and that the goddess really is, I mean, you could call it what it is, basically, they think, but what it is the goddess. And it is very much different than Christianity because it is, the like leader kind of the religion is a woman, the Lady of the Lake, which is very different than Christianity, obviously, where it's more patriarchal. Arthur's family has roots in Avalon. His mother and his aunt and his other aunt, you know, are all of the bloodline of Avalon. And they basically put things into play so that Arthur will be on the throne. And then, since they basically put him on the throne, they say, you know, you owe us. But, I mean, they aren't asking for a lot. They're just saying, like, fly the banner of the goddess. They don't care if people are Christian, but they say, maybe you shouldn't say that you're Christian because that really means that you're excluding everybody else. And not everybody else in the world and in the country are Christians. But he marries Guinevere, who is very stoutly Christian. And so the really big conflict in this book is Morgane, who has become, who was raised in Avalon, basically. She is on her way to being the Lady of the Lake. Her brother Arthur, who she loves, but he, like, you know, doesn't want to honor the promises he's given to Avalon. Is just a gigantic saga of basically before and during and after the lives of Arthur, or the life of Arthur. He only has one life, what am I saying? It's such a great book. And it's a book where there's not like a ton of really like, there's not like really high peaks of conflict. Like there are obviously conflicts in this book, but it's not super action-packed. But like despite that, this is a book that I can never put down once I start reading it. It's just so good. And like I know what's going to happen, but it's so good. and it's really one of my favorite books of all time. I gave this 5 stars. I give it 5 stars every time I read it. It's just a really great book, and the characters are all so well fleshed out and interesting, and yeah, I mean, it's really character driven, I'd say, and it's a good book, and I would recommend it. So that's what I read in June. But anyways, I have an affiliate page for bookshop.org. They are an online bookseller. So like, if you maybe don't want to put all your money into the pockets of Amazon, I mean, there's also like Barnes & Noble and other independent bookstores, but bookshop.org is cool because they donate part of their profits to other indie bookstores around the country. You can select one in your area if they are signed up. Otherwise, it will just kind of, you know, doles it around equally. But like I said, I'm an affiliate now. I will have an affiliate page that I will leave in the description box of my video. And on there, I will have the books that I read recently on a list called Recent Reads, which will make it easier. If you want to pick any of them up, it kicks back a little bit of money to me and a little bit of money to independent bookstores around the country, and it's pretty cool. No pressure or anything, but if you want to do that, it's there. So that's all I have for you. I will be back with my July TBR and my Reading Rush TBR in the next couple days, so look for those. I will see you guys later. Goodbye!